One of the key partners in the Human Hobble Walking Track project is the New South Wales Rural Fire Service. They play such an important role in regional New South Wales.
Hi, I'm Inspector Marg Wayner, Operations Services Coordinator for the New South Wales Rural Fire Service Southern Border Team. When you come out of off the main part of the Womargama National Park into the valley of Bonawaima, that section of the privately owned trail is particularly prone to lightning strikes. That the whole of the national park has a lot of mineral in it, and that area has from time to time had extensive lightning strike activity. Makes it really difficult because there's not a lot of fire trails in the vicinity, and so if somebody is caught on the Human Hobble track in that area, first of all, we don't always know where they are. But if we do know where they are, we can't always get to them to give them any kind of protection or help them out of that situation, because it's very rugged, it's very steep country, and it's only got intermittent fire trails that cross it. I remember about 10 years ago we had a particularly heavy spring period of lightning strikes, and we had 14 lightning strikes just in that section of the national park, or the privately owned land that adjoins the national park and the reserve. So, you know, you've got fire crews running around all over the place trying to catch up with these fires, and it is always awkward to know when there are people on the track, because there is no way of knowing how fast they're travelling, where they've started, where they've finished, where they might be in relation to their markers, or where they might have signed their logbooks, all that sort of thing. So it can be quite dangerous. The other thing is, as you come down into that open country, it's mostly farming community, mostly grazing, and fires travel very, very quickly across grazing land. Also, it's, for those people who don't know, fires travel really fast uphill, and of course it's quite a steep run up into the reserve and national park. And any fires that start in this part of the world generally tend to run from the west to the east behind a north or a northwesterly wind, and that makes it particularly dangerous for people who are actually on the Human Hobble track, because they might see a smoke sighting as they're coming down but not actually think of it speeding up as it comes towards them. And in fact, our grass fires travel incredibly quickly. They can easily cover 15 kilometres in less than 40 minutes. And we've had that in the last few years. And then of course when they hit an upward slope, they're going to double their rate of speed. So you can get caught very, very quickly from a smoke sighting that appears to you to be quite a long way away. We tend to find that fires start in this landscape predominantly from lightning. However, farming activities often are our second highest. Haymaking, you know, not getting the curing accurate, and machinery, so slashing and the harvesting or the cutting of hay, those sorts of things would be second. And occasionally we might get a fire started from perhaps carelessness, of a fire that's been lit intentionally, whether it be a campfire or a farmer doing some burning and not predicting the weather situation well enough, and that might get away under a strong wind or a particularly not a good break around it or something like that. But generally, lightning would be the highest cause of fires in that section of the forest or walk. The New South Wales Rural Fire Service is the largest firefighting organisation in the world. It's made up of predominantly volunteers who work out of brigades that cover sections of every piece of rural land in New South Wales. In the section of the Human Hobble track that we're looking at predominantly today, it's the Bonawaima Brigade, and it's made up of individuals who live in this community. They come together whenever they're needed to fight fires, and we help, as staff, we help organise them to do that. But predominantly they're volunteer organisations that just go out of their way to not only protect their patch but protect other people and people in that environment. So campers, for instance, in Bonawaima, campers and holiday makers at the resort and people on the human hobble track. So it's important for people to recognise that it's very much a grassroots organisation. It works from the people in the communities where the brigade is centralised. And I suppose over the years, the things that have changed for them particularly is the introduction of, or escalation of, aircraft being used to fight fires, and particularly in landscapes like the hill country that we see in this section of the human hobble track that adjoins Bonawaima. That country is very steep and quite inaccessible, and it's become essential for us to be able to utilise aircraft in areas where fires start, particularly as a result of lightning strikes, because we can't get appliances or fire trucks or even small vehicles into some of those areas. So helicopters and small aircraft become our predominant firefighting force when that occurs. And certainly when we've had large numbers of lightning strikes, helicopters or aircraft are used to work out, first of all, where the fires are and whether or not we can get to them, and then obviously assist us with the firefighting activity. Very handy because it's right next to the Hume Weir, so we have water that's very easy to get for aircraft, because that's always a problem. Then if you've got aircraft, how far do they have to go to refuel or get water? But for this area, it's quite simple, and we've had many occasions when aircraft have been used in this environment to put out lightning strikes or other fires that might have started. Some of the fires that we've had across this landscape, this section of the human hobble track, particularly mostly the grass fires that have occurred in the last 20 years have started. One particularly that started in Albury and ran across this bottom section of the human hobble track out here at Thurgoona, started on One Tree Hill in Albury, or Red Light Hill as it's known, and the embers were thrown through Thurgoona, and that ran right across the tail end here of the human hobble track and was only stopped because of the weir. The very large fire that we had back in the 50s that took out the majority of the national park and burnt up, came out of the Henty Holbrook area, but then ran across all of the park, and so took out the human hobble track as it goes over the tunnel road and into that eastern section. And then of course lots and lots of small fires that the brigade is able to deal with quite quickly. We haven't had any other major fires in this section except for those two in the last 50 years. But you know, you're always wary, aren't you, that if you haven't had a big fire, it's always possible that you will get, your time will come. And as the environment becomes more densely populated, we find that there's a greater chance of fires. And coming back to that machinery stuff, like what we have found over the last 5 to 10 years is that in those areas where we're getting more rural lifestyle development, you've got a greater potential for people not to be as aware of how easy it is to start a fire. So you might think, oh, I'll get out there and do that slashing or that mowing, and it's not really the best day to do that, or you decide to do it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's not great either. So you'll hit a rock with the mower, and next thing you've got a fire that becomes big without you even thinking about it, especially on a bad day. And if it's a day that's got even a 35k an hour wind running behind it, next thing it's not only in your place, it's in the neighbours, and then in the neighbours and their neighbours, and all of a sudden you have a big fire. So that general awareness. The other thing that's a real issue where we have so many roads is that our new vehicles, catalytic converters in our new vehicles, people pull off the road because they have to when they're on the phone, and they want to get off the road because we know that it's pretty easy to get wiped out if you don't pull far enough off the road. And if the grass has grown up and is touching any of the underside of your vehicle, it's really easy to start a fire just from the heat, the catalytic conversion equipment that's under your vehicle. And that's something that happens, like it's often not cigarettes anymore, it tends to be catalytic converters. Yesterday we had a fire start with a chain falling off the back of a trailer as someone was running along the Olympic Highway, and it the sparks from the chain on the bitumen started quite a large, ended up being quite a large grass fire just off the side of the road. So it's, when the weather's not at its best, it's really good, it's really easy to start fires, and they can get away really quickly. I guess for walkers it's important that, and mostly they don't tend to light fires except if it's in the winter time, but that they're particularly cautious and that they make sure that if they do start a fire, light a fire, that they put it out before they leave that area. And generally, we certainly haven't had anybody, any fires that I know of in my time, start as a consequence of walkers on the trail.